Welcome back. You're watching News Center. Trade negotiations between China and the U.S. will resume today. Trade officials from both nations are set to meet in London. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Trade Representatives Jamieson Greer will be meeting China's Vice Premier, who is Beijing's chief trade negotiator as well. This resumption of talks comes just days after U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping held a phone call. President Trump said the call resulted in a very positive conclusion for both nations. According to Chinese state media, Xi told Trump that the U.S. must withdraw the negative measures it has taken against China. To take this forward, I'm now joined by Sean Rain, founder and managing director of the China Market Research Group. Thank you for joining us on the show today. Sean, what's your hope, expectation from these talks that are going to be held in London between China and the United States to somehow bring certain positivity in trade relations between the two nations?
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me on this important day. It's very clear as the data came out the last month that China is hurting from the trade war, right? Exports to the United States dropped about 34.5%, which is the worst since the very early stages of COVID in 2020. You saw that exports only went up 4.8% overall, down from the 5% expectation a lot of economists had. So let's be clear, the trade war is impacting China's economy. And so China wants to sort of come to a detente with the United States. However, as I said the last time I spoke with you, China clearly has the upper hand in the trade war in the United States because of its monopoly-like powers on rare earth. And because it produces everything that the United States wants. So while America buys products from China, China controls over 95% of antibiotics that's sent to the United States. China makes all the Advil and ibuprofen and Tylenol that's sent to the United States. So it's very clear that while China's economy has been hit hard for the trade war, that America's economy and consumer is going to be hit even harder. So both sides need to come together and sort of come up with a detente.
Right. You know, one of the biggest problems possibly that the U.S. negotiators would try and resolve is China's restriction, export controls on rare earth magnets, which have been in effect since the 4th of April, Sean. As a goodwill gesture, China has granted certain license to some U.S. automakers, but clearly they would be looking for a long-term reprieve. Do you think China will be able to lift those restrictions after today's meeting?
No. So I think, China has increased rare earth exports about 5% since the meeting in Switzerland. But China views this not just as a national security issue, but this is real leverage because China feels that the United States is lying and breaking the agreement that was agreed to in Switzerland. In the last couple of weeks, you've seen that the United States has stopped issuing visas for students from China to study in the United States. They've also said that they might ban all Chinese who are already taking STEM and other national security risk majors in the United States. So what you have here is you have Howie Lutnick, you have Scotty Bessent, who are doing the negotiations in London, but you have Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, who's really kind of a bad actor right now. And so the Chinese are very angry. I mean, it's fair when adults fight, but Marco Rubio was, punching below the belt by stopping all of China's kids from being able to go to the school in the United States. And it's just morally wrong to go after children. So I don't think that China is going to completely repeal export controls on rare earths until they see goodwill and trustworthiness from the United States. You also see Scotty Bessent has been saying that China broke the agreement, but that's just not really true. I mean, the United States has increased export controls on semiconductors. They've increased export controls on design software for semiconductors. So even though I'm American and love the United States, we have to be honest here. And you can see that Scotty B and Howie Lutnick have really been the bad actors in trying to control China. And Marco Rubio has been the worst of worst. So I don't think China is going to do anything with rare earths in a meaningful way, maybe a little bit over 3 months.
Okay. We can understand the tensions between U.S. and China and why China is using rare earth magnets as a leverage over the United States. But their export controls are for everyone, including India. Why would you impose that restriction on India at this juncture?
So I think China's way of saying this is a national security threat, we're not directly targeting the United States. We're putting export controls on rare earth for the whole world. I think that's their reasoning. Now, I personally disagree with that. Because I think that's not fair to Suzuki, the Japanese automaker. It's not fair to the Indian automakers. So if I were China, I would say, wait a minute, we want to be a positive clog in the entire global economy. We can't be limiting rare earths. That's just not fair to other countries. We can understand why they limit to the United States because the US is a bad actor right now that's bullying China, but China shouldn't do that to India. That's the first thing. The second thing is, as we've seen, export controls typically shoot people in the foot, right? The United States put a lot of export controls on China in semiconductors over the last 8 years. So what has China done? They've built up the semiconductor sector by building up companies like SMIC, SMIC, and Huawei by putting in hundreds of billions of dollars into indigenous innovation. If China goes so far to scare India, to scare Japan, to scare Europe, to say, we're not going to give you rare earth, that ultimately, I think, will shoot China in the foot because other countries will start to focus on refining. Now, here's the thing. China has probably a 10-year lead on refining rare earths. But you got to look, other countries are smart. Other countries have money. Other countries have access to the rare earth minerals. At some point, they're going to be able to catch up and build up the refineries. The same way that China's caught up with the United States and the Dutch with semiconductors.
Sean,
I agree with what China's doing.
Sean, just wanted to pursue the India question a bit. In the last few days, we have seen China granting export licenses to certain automakers in Europe and US. This has happened. It's not that they are continuously restricting it for everyone. But Indian automakers, and we spoke to Maruti Suzuki, which is India's largest car maker, earlier today. They said their applications have been pending, and for the rest of the Indian industry, since over a month, since probably even before the 4th of April. But those licenses have not been granted. Why would you do that? If you are granting in some cases, but why not grant them for India?
I think the problem is there's just too much tension between China and India. Right now, there are dozens and dozens of Chinese apps like TikTok that are still banned in India. A lot of Chinese companies like Xiaomi have become under investigation for tax issues, which a lot of Chinese think are fraudulent and just not true. And it's more fear-mongering from the Modi administration to attack China. So I think this is just an example that China wants to flex its muscles and show India, look, at the end of the day, we still have the leverage, we still have the power. You need to be better and nicer to China's industry. That's what I think China is doing. It's a little bit of bullying, if you want to call it that. But I also think India has also been bullying Chinese companies. I hope that the two countries can work closer together because I don't think either country can trust the United States right now. Look, I think India is going to be a major power in the next 10 and 20 years. It's going to be a superpower. It's rightfully going to be a superpower as the largest, most populous nation in the world. But what I would say to my Indian friends, you need to be careful of the United States. When any country, Japan in the past, China now, India in the future, gets strong enough to rival the United States, there are going to be the war hawks in the US who won't like that and will try to oppress India. So I think if Modi and the Indians were smart, they would balance against the United States and try to get closer to China. If they were to allow TikTok back in, if they would stop some of these tax investigations, maybe China would export more rare earth to Indian automakers.
Right. My final question, Sean, do you believe that today, if US and China come to a truce in the London negotiations, will there be a reprieve for India on rare earth magnets? Do you feel the two developments are connected, or you feel that irrespective of the outcome of the US-China trade talks, the ban on export of rare earth magnets to India will continue?
That's a great question. I think China is going to be very cautious on lifting any bans because that's where they have leverage in other parts of negotiation. So I think they've been giving it, as you mentioned earlier, to certain automakers from certain countries. They just want to hold it as sort of Damocles over other countries. Now, again, I don't always agree with that, but I think that's what they're doing right now because China just feels very cornered by the rest of the world. And they feel that, whether it be Europe, whether it be the United States, and especially India, that they just haven't been playing fairly with China and Chinese enterprises. And so China just wants to have a little bit of leverage. But I'm hopeful that at least we'll have some decent conversations in London. It's tough, though, because Howard Lutnick has been calling for even more export controls on China. and it's really just sort of been disingenuous and gaslighting the American people that China's been breaking the agreement when it's really the United States that has been doing that first.
All right, Sean Rain, thank you so much for joining us on the program on News Center, giving us your view on the very important talks in London between US and Beijing. And this could really have an impact on China's relationship with other countries, especially on the rare earth issue, which is dominating global headlines at this juncture. Thanks once again for being with us. That's all the time we have on this edition of News Center. More news and updates continue right here.